Hi guys, my name is Michael. Welcome back. So we're just going to talk about a couple of trending topics around the world. And for today, if you're following any financial daily, it's all about Japan. Everyone is talking about Japan, and it just feels like a lot is breaking under the Japanese economy as we speak. And so all eyes are on Japan right now because a couple of days ago, the Japanese government made a very unusual move to increase interest rate to 0.25%. And I'm going to share with you how all that affects how everything is coming together for Japan at the moment. Now, if you take a look at this article, you'll see it here that Japan stocks plunged by nearly 6% in biggest drop since start of the pandemic. Now, this article is talking about what is happening right now in Japan, but it doesn't really give you the background story of what Japan has been up to in the last couple of years. Now, if you understand Japan, Japan is an exporting nation. They've got all those big companies in Japan. You've got companies like Sony, you've got companies like Mitsubishi, Honda, Toyota. All these companies are all based out of Japan, and they export their goods around the world. So in order to make their economy competitive, with other economies like China and all these other exporting nation, the Japanese government decided to go on a little experiment called yield curve control. This is where they artificially keep the interest rate in Japan low, at zero or below zero, if I can put it that way. So, and this really helped the Japanese economy because companies in Japan were able to borrow money at nearly 0% interest rate. This helped, their good. This helped them put the price of their good, at a competitive space because if you're borrowing money at a very high interest rate, obviously most manufacturers or most businesses are going to pass that cost over to the customer. And the moment the price of your goods are high, then you are not going to be competitive, in the global landscape because China, who is an expert in currency manipulation, the prices of their goods are cheap. Do you get what I'm saying? So Japan went on this experiment, and it's been all good, for the last couple of years. There's been a little bit of turbulence here and there, but so far the Japanese government has been able to keep everything steady. This created a lot of prosperity in Japan. Things in Japan were relatively cheap. The Japanese people have come to know this soft life, of goods never going up. So there are a lot of things in Japan that has not increased in price in the last 10 years. You go around the world, you see the price of something today, you come back 3 months later and the price has changed because inflation, things are businesses are passing on the costs of production to consumers immediately. But if you go to Japan, there are a lot of goods in Japan that have remained at the same price for the last 10 years. It has not even budged. So the Japanese people have come to know this soft life where prices never go up. Everything is just cheap, in Japan. And that's the life they've been living for the last 10 years. So it just feels like reality is about to catch up with Japan, if I can put it that way. So while Japan has been on this yield curve control thing, obviously keeping interest rate at zero or below zero is not profitable for any sort of investor, both, the Japanese investor. So most of the Japanese people have been sending their money across the sea, to the United States, where they can get a little bit of interest, right? So if you're a company in Japan, it doesn't pay you anything to save your money in Japan, right? Because if you put your money in the bank, you're getting next to 0%, for that money. But if you take that money and buy US treasuries, where it was like 2%, 3%, at some point. Even now, it's even more, a lot better. It's like four, I think one time it got to like 4% or so. So it was a lot better for Japanese companies and Japanese funds, to send their money to the United States and buy US treasuries where they could see some yield because there was no yield to be found in Japan. And so the reason why you need to understand this is when you look at it, you will see that Japan is the highest holder of US treasuries, right? Around the world, they're the highest holder of US treasuries. And this is why, this is how they got to that situation because most of the money in Japan was flowing to the United States to save in treasuries so that they can at least get some yield. But things are changing in Japan. Like I said, a couple of days ago, the Japanese government, increased interest rate to 0.25%, which was a big move for them. Having been in zero or below zero for a long time, changing to 0.25 0.25%, which is almost nothing if you look at what is happening in the Western world. England, I think we just came down to the BOE just reduced the interest rate. I think it was hovering around 5%, right? If you look at the United States, all around the world, countries in Africa are facing 22%, interest rates, things like that. So for the Japanese economy, increasing it to 0.25% is a big deal, actually, apparently, if you look at it that way. So that has been the story of Japan, and the life in Japan was so soft that even right now, as the BOJ has started increasing interest rate, most of the Japanese businesses don't even know what to do. Most of them don't even know how to increase prices, the prices of their goods, if I could put it that way. So if you take a look at this article here, it says Japanese businesses are taking lessons in raising prices, right? I mean, you come to the Western world, it's very easy. All these guys, they just raise their prices every single day. As soon as they go back to the manufacturer or they go back to the commodity supplier and they find out that the price has gone up, the price for wheat, the price for energy, the price, as soon as they find that out, they immediately pass it over to the customer, right? Immediately. But businesses in Japan, because they have been used to this artificially low interest rate environment where things have been just so cozy, they don't even know how to raise the prices of their goods anymore. So that's how the mentality is beginning to shift in Japan. As a matter of fact, the story in Japan is that as a business, right, if you raise your prices in Japan, everyone is looking at you like you're too greedy. Like, why are you greedy? They see it as a form of immorality, right, to raise the prices of your goods in Japan. That is the kind of life people in Japan have been living for the longest. But like I said, things are changing. And you might be wondering, what is happening in Japan? Does it affect me in any way? It's happening in Japan. It doesn't affect me. But, we're in 2024, and you need to understand that the world is a global village and everything is connected. Everything is connected, especially when it comes to the financial system. Everything is connected. Something happening in Japan has the potential to affect everything in the West, because it is all connected. And like I said earlier, Japan has become the highest holder of U.S. treasuries, right? They are the highest holder of U.S. debt, if I can put it that way, and they hold a lot of treasuries, the U.S. treasuries. So if there's an issue with the currency in Japan, one of the ways that the Japanese government or the BOJ, which is the Bank of Japan, would try to resolve that issue would be to sell those treasuries to support the yen. And they've done this a couple of times. Anytime, there was an issue with the yen or the yen was falling, way below their comfort level, they will sell treasuries, which they have in the US, to support the yen, to prop up the yen, as they would call it, to prop up the yen. So you can imagine that if there was an issue if there was if there was an issue that was beyond the BOJ's control, there will be a lot of selling of US treasuries. And if you're selling US treasuries at a rapid rate and you bring that much treasury into the market, it could cause a lot of problem for the United States, right? It could cause a lot of problem. So the United States has always had their eyes on Japan. Do you get that? They don't want the issues that may happen in Japan to affect them, right? So they have a lot of things, they have a lot of measures that they have put in place that, okay, if there was an issue in Japan where Japan had to sell or had to support the yen, how would they go about this? Because the US would not want Japan to dump 100 billion, 200 billion, or 300 billion of treasuries, in one go. That would really cause a lot of problems for the US. So they have a lot of mechanisms they put in place, like swap lines. They have the US Federal Reserve have a swap line with Japan, the Bank of Japan, to provide them liquidity if they were in trouble and all that. But you just get the sense that a lot of issues, are on the horizon. It just feels like things are shaking below at the foundation of this whole thing. And I've always had the belief that, one of Japan will be a catalyst for a lot of problems when it comes to the global financial system, because that is the weakest point at the moment, Japan. And that is why you're seeing Japan everywhere, And one of the things we need to understand is that now that the Bank of Japan has begun to raise interest rate, right? For instance, they've raised interest rate to 0.25. It is now profitable for businesses, for funds in Japan to save their money in Japan. Remember, when the interest rate was at zero or negative, it was not profitable for businesses or for funds to or investors to keep their money in the bank in Japan because it was yielding next to nothing. As a matter of fact, there was one point it was negative, right? But now that the BOJ has begun to raise interest rate, now that they have something like 0.25%, you know, it, some businesses or some investors in Japan might begin to think that, you know what, it's better to bring the money back to Japan and save it here. At least I'm going to get 0.25%, right? Especially when you look at the geopolitical risks that are attached with keeping money abroad at the moment. So most Japanese businesses and investors might begin to bring their money back from the United States into Japan. So we need to watch Japan. We need to watch Japan. So if this trend continues, and let's say, at the next BOJ meeting, they raise it again to something like 0.5, then, a lot of businesses will find it profitable to bring their money back from the United States into the Japan into Japan. So those are the things we need to watch out for, and these things have domino effects. They do have domino effects. Do you get what I'm saying? When a country such as Japan, that is really sensitive in terms of the global financial system, is having a problem, it has the potential to drag other nations with it. Do you get? And that is the downside of this whole global economy that we're in at the moment. So I just thought I would bring that to your attention. In case you're seeing Japan all over the news, you need to understand that, Japan has been involved in some sort of experiment that is now that is now giving them issues, if I can put it that way. So so if you like videos like this, please do click on the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.